Hello, I'm Tima Özden, the Studio and Engagement Manager at Tashkeel. Welcome to Tashkeel Talks. Today I'm joined by Kevin Jones, a longtime Tashkeel collaborator. Kevin Jones is an art consultant, writer, critic, and educator. He's been in the Middle East for over 14 years, serving as UAE desk editor for Art Asia Pacific magazine. In 2019, Kevin founded Juniper Mind, a consultancy that challenges artists, brands, and institutions to think more critically. Today, we'll be talking about a course that Kevin will be conducting starting July, called Artists Working Through Crisis. And before we get into a course, Kevin, I wanted to ask you, how do you think the pandemic has affected the art world? And I'm sure you've been asked this a million times, but I'm really curious to hear what you have to say. And maybe also if you've been having conversations with artists and, what kind of concerns they have and what are
Yeah.
they thinking?
Well, hi, and thank you very much for suggesting this talk and having me on it. And again, as I said, I think my attachment to Tashkeel has intensified in times of crisis as well, because I realize how much I counted on it as a space to go to and to see certain faces and to have certain conversations that I wouldn't have elsewhere. So I guess I can frame my answer about how it's impacted the art world by this sense of absence and distance that I think we all feel about our peers, right? About people kind of working in the same field or on similar questions. And somehow Zoom, I mean, for all of its benefits, doesn't necessarily kind of nail it as well. But having said that, I mean, yes, a lot of the artists, I mean, I think if you had asked me this question, a month and a half ago, I would have had a very different answer than I have today. And I think what I'm seeing today is, I wouldn't say hope necessarily, but a degree of adaptation and a beginning of a kind of resilience. So sort of like, okay, well, this is a way that we're going to work, and maybe we need to ask questions about how we fill in for the gaps that we had, and it's less about sort of. I find people are more, again, I don't want to use the word optimism because I'm not necessarily sensing optimism. I think there's a reserve around being optimistic. And I think those who believe in this kind of much touted idea of the new normal, I mean, I even think that that's quite problematic as an idea, you know what I mean? I think that there is nothing, to go back to. There's only, everything to recreate and reimagine. So the artists that I see are concerned with connections. I mean, the people that I speak to are concerned with using also an amount of time that they seem to feel that they have now to perfect, to dig deeper, to modify maybe some research and looking at different media, different lines of questioning. I feel also that there's a time, that they have for learning. I mean, I've certainly seen that in work that I've been doing on the side, that there's an intensification of questioning around, well, should I know more about this? And okay, let me try and explore. And that's really refreshing, and that's really kind of interesting to see that training and learning was somehow, compartmentalized somewhere else for a long time, and now it seems to somehow be blossoming in an interesting way.
Do you sense that, I remember when, the lockdown first happened, there was a lot of maybe outside pressure to be productive and create and keep going, and never lack the discipline, all that kind of quite toxic maybe messaging, and which works for some people and maybe for some it doesn't. But do you think now the art or the artist or the arts ecosystem, do you feel it's been more they're digging deeper, also like questioning the real essence of what is it to be an artist? what is it to be an art institution? What are we actually doing? So like more kind of thoughtfulness versus productivity and making and just adapting to the new normal. So
Yeah, completely. And again, I mean, I felt there was this period, as you say, where we saw a lot of what someone called very poetically productivity porn, you know, like people showing their Zoom meetings or showing their, you know, timelines or showing these things that are the trappings of productivity and progress. And again, it seemed like a very like knee-jerk sort of, you know, work hard, be better sort of ethic. And I'm finding that that is somehow modulated now, and people are a little bit again, and this is where the training part comes in. I think in this sort of explosion of time and this kind of questioning of, but wait, why are we working? And what are these ways of working that we never really were never offered to us before? You know, how can we kind of go with those and go with that flow? So yeah, I feel that that's one of the things that has really changed. Now, is it entirely existential? Are artists saying, you know, what is it to be an artist today, or what is it to be an art institution today? I don't think we're there yet. I mean, I think that there's a little bit of that maybe in the background, but I still think that there's a sense of adaptation, like how do I move with this, but in a less kind of knee-jerk way. Again, I feel it's more, I mean, it's more nuanced and it's more layered. There's a great essay which I'm hoping that we'll be able to read in the workshop by Slavoj Žižek, who talks about these two figures that have arisen during this pandemic of the people who are tired. And so the question is, why are we always tired? Right? And the one figure is the person who is really actually physically extended, who are people working the front line and who are actually in hospitals and in medical urgent, you know, emergency situations. And then, so that's, you know, real physical tiredness and fatigue. And then there's the other who is someone who, you know, is watching everything on Netflix or has too much time to do everything and is tired through a sense of boredom or through a sense of like, there's nothing else for me to do. And there's no, you know, how many 9-hour long epic movies can I watch? And, you know, it's like, and that culture of lists, you know, like every book you need to read during the pandemic just fueled that other type of fatigue, which seems a lot less empty and that. But I think this idea of fatigue and being tired is really interesting. And I almost feel that there are a lot of people who are coming out of that now, who are sort of morphing into it, the medical people aside, because I think that that's probably still quite intense. But I think that we're becoming a little bit more serious about this idea of boredom and awaiting coming back to normal somehow. So yeah, I mean, I think that we're a lot more nuanced in our expectations of things. But again, like I think this course also, this workshop should somehow maybe push things a little bit more towards the existential, right? Like get people to reflect a little bit more on, you know, not necessarily questioning why they're artists, but questioning as artists what they can, how they can evolve, like what can they do now specifically.
So maybe now you can tell our viewers a little bit about the course, maybe the framework, and what are your maybe expectations of it in a good way.
Okay.
For whoever is attending and who it might be interesting for.
Okay, so let me start with kind of the background thinking and the framework on it. And you know, again, as you kind of referenced, there was this moment when we saw a lot of, you know, push to produce, push to progress, push to be, you know, active and continue contributing to, you know, the economy, the society, however you can. But in a way, and again, that was also echoed by a lot of roundtables and sort of groups of people who would come together to try to, either in terms of policy or in terms of grants or in terms of financial aid, somehow come up with solutions to help, right? And so this was almost everywhere. And again, these are all not denigrating the value of these initiatives. But what it seemed to me is if you step back a bit, and if you look at not producing, like if you look at what happens before making the choice to produce or not, what's happening there? And specifically, I'm talking about artists now. Like if an artist backs up and says, well, look, so much has changed. I don't have, I'm not having exhibition spaces anymore. I don't have peers around me to talk necessarily as I would. I can't do studio visits. I can't necessarily even successfully, buy materials and work or have access to things that I had access, very, very easily before, and again, I think that there's this kind of halt of also a kind of thinking and investment and reading, and just kind of stunned into a new reality. So I wanted to explore that a lot more than the outcomes of things. I wanted to explore, like, what are we thinking in these times? And again, Tashkeel has this reputation, right, of being, a cross-pollinator, a locus of a place where people come and exchange. And a lot of the courses that I've done over the years that I've worked with the institution, you see artists helping each other, right? Like in a lot of the critical dialogues classes, you would have people who were new to Dubai who would benefit from other people's, knowledge or understanding of how to navigate things. And there was this great sort of exchange. Again, mutual support, feedback. So Tashkeel has carved out for itself this very nice space of inter-artist support, and appreciation to a certain degree. And so I really wanted to capitalize on that for this course. And I thought, well, look, the more I thought about it, it's not really a workshop. It's really more like a therapy session. And there were a lot of people who would, like, I would end up having therapy sessions with people. I mean, and it's in its broadest sense, right? Just thinking about where they are at their practice now and how they're talking about their practice and with whom they're talking about their practice. So it seems like this was the moment to actually sit down and apply a methodology to this. Like sit down with artists, listen to them, let them listen to each other, somehow frame the situation. Again, I don't want to talk in terms of blockages or obstacles just yet, but let's download the situation where we are. 10 artists in a room who will sit with you and tell you, like, what they're feeling, what's good, what's bad, what were their apprehensions, how has it impacted their work. From there, we sort of put together a sort of succession of what I call central questions. So each of the people have a central question that they would want to answer, and then jointly we would work through helping find answers to those. Now, these are not answers that are like sort of like eureka moments where, oh, everything makes sense and tomorrow I'm going to, be signed on to Gladstone Gallery and, everything is beautiful. It's not. It's more, these are steps in a much wider process, but I think in the context of, so-called crisis, that we like have this moment of reflection. And I think this is where people will bond more as well. I think this is where people will have, there's a kind of galvanizing effect to this as well, that if you bring artists together, because I've been looking at everything in isolation, but in a way, like, I think it would be very useful to have this group therapy where you have, a big whole that everyone is kind of working. And again, it's not an outcome. It's not to say, okay, you must provide a solution to your blockage now. It's not that at all. It really is working through these things and maybe signposting new ways of thinking, even new ways of getting around a lack of audience, new ways of imagining peer critiques or new types of reading to do, even instead of sticking to the same old thing. So yeah, I mean, the course will have a degree of suggested readings that I'll bring to it, again, just for us to sort of take stock of where we are. Again, these are critical thinkers. Again, if my promise is to help people think more critically, I mean, I have to show them critical writing to a certain degree. So let them sort of digest this and react to this, and these will be the sort of the fodder for our conversations going forward. Again, I'm really looking forward to this kind of group dynamic that can that can forge different avenues of thinking.
If I feel like if one thing that's positive, for lack of a better word, is happened is it's the surge of artists kind of trying to help each other and connect, and because it's, I mean, being an artist, it's already a very isolating experience because you're kind of in your own head, or you're working, or in your studio, you're doing things by yourself. And it's been really beautiful to see some, artist-led initiatives where they're hosting talks, or they're just keeping connected and keep talking to each other, because it's also one thing maybe to engage in like online webinars and things like that, which are led by, maybe a gallerist or so on, but it's kind of another thing where it's artists talking to artists. It's really helpful and kind of reassuring. So, I mean, as an artist who is working as a working artist, I'm so excited about this course, because I've, just like everybody else, I've been also asking myself a lot of questions, and maybe even too existential in a way, like, should I even be an artist? Like, what does it mean to be an artist? And my practice is also relies a lot on one-on-one or a group interaction in the physical. It's quite tactile, so I've been thinking, what does it mean? Does it go with? So it's a really exciting course for really.
But again, I mean, I think so. One of the things that I do, as you probably know, in critical dialogues, which is something that has run, Tashkeel for now, 4 years, I think, that we do traditionally in September, is to get artists to really examine what I call the drivers of their practice, right? Like, what is it that fundamentally pushes the practice forward? And although this is framed in an outcome, so there's a writing outcome that we try to bring them to, which is not the typical artist statement, but which is a text that really is almost like an extension of the practice, or that crystallizes specifically these drivers and these things that move the practice forward. So, again, like, getting them to go to dig deep and look at, like, what is driving the practice forward. So it's not like a medium. Usually, like, oh yeah, my driver is sculpture, or my driver is installation. It's not. Like, what is it? So it almost kind of is contiguous with questioning around, why am I an artist, right? But it is more practice oriented. It will kind of move you into, why am I doing what I'm doing now? And I feel like this is an exercise that I hope that we can cover in this workshop, because it may be a moment of consolidation, right? It may be a moment of like, okay, I'm right. I mean, this is really what drives my practice forward, and this is what I'm going to stick with, even if I have to imagine other sort of channels or outcomes or touch points for it to, like, be in the world. But it might be this moment of, like, taking stock. It's not just to throw everything out and start again, although some artists may come to that conclusion. But I would really like to use this time for everyone to really look at the drivers and at these kind of real foundational pillars of a practice. And something else I should add about this course is that, I'll use writing in it. It's not as writing outcome driven as critical dialogues, because I think critical dialogues does promise giving a text that artists can use just for self-representation, either as accompanying a CV, as a sort of artist statement, something that they can give to curators to give a sense of their practice. But I think that I'll take a much more therapeutic use of writing here. Like, I find writing really interesting to work through kind of obstacles that you may encounter in a practice, or when you are looking at peers, and how do you position, when you need to really come back into touch with what makes your practice distinctive in relation to your peers. I find that writing through what these potential worldviews are, and how these other practices are positioned, I mean, to use like really callous marketing word, but how these other practices sort of are fit in a constellation, and where am I? Even not just in terms of peers that are working in the region, but worldwide. Like, where does my practice? And you write through this. Like, you write through, what is this artist doing? Explain the worldview, and it's almost like look at the work and then come back and look at how you see the worldview of that artist, like in backing up from the product that they produce, and how does yours align with that. So, and again, like writing through concepts as well. People, artists have good ideas and good initiatives that just need help to, be slightly re-engineered in terms of clarity, in terms of, a jargonless concept is great. Like, again, I think maybe one thing of like getting back in touch with ourselves also means, questioning some of the received ways of writing and working that we kind of suffered with for a long time. So concepts that are really clear and free of any kind of jargon, I think, are a great site also of, of helping artists sort of re-visualize or reimagine practices and bodies of work.
Sounds really wonderful. I think we are running
out of time. Okay.
Thank you so much for your time, and we're so excited for us. And everyone, just look out for announcements on our social media. Follow us, follow Kevin, and stay safe.
Okay. Thank you, Tima. See you. Bye.